the stadium didn't gradually empty. It collapsed. One moment, thousands of Filipino fans were waving flags and chanting so loudly that the entire venue seemed to shake. The next, the noise was gone, banners folded, rows of seats empty, and only footsteps echoing through the concrete corridors. Eala had walked off the court, and somehow, it felt like she had taken the soul of the Cincinnati Open with her. The 21-year-old Filipina had become the tournament's biggest drawing force, and the moment her run ended, organizers were left confronting one uncomfortable question. What happens to a tournament when its biggest attraction is suddenly gone? To understand that silence, you first have to understand the noise that came before it. The Lindner Family Tennis Center had been transformed throughout the week. Philippine flags appeared throughout the venue, Filipino fans filled the stands, and the atmosphere surrounding Eala's matches felt completely different from a normal tennis session. Every time she stepped onto court, the building came alive. Fans traveled, stayed late, and created an atmosphere that made even a regular tournament match feel like a major sporting event. The demand surrounding Eala had become impossible to ignore. Reports suggested that fans were willing to pay hundreds of dollars, and in some cases close to $1,000 on the resale market, to see her play. Tournament officials also highlighted just how much attention her schedule was generating, with a huge share of ticket inquiries focused specifically on when Eala would take the court. This wasn't simply curiosity about a rising player. It was a fan movement, and Cincinnati wasn't the first tournament to experience it. Washington had already seen an enormous Filipino turnout. Toronto went even further, with Eala's matches drawing crowds large enough to require larger courts. By the time she arrived in Cincinnati, the tournament had already seen what the so-called Eala effect could do. But even then, the scale of the response was difficult to predict. Then came August 17, 2026. Late at night in Cincinnati, Eala faced Amanda Anisimova, the world number 10 and a proven Grand Slam contender. What followed was a dramatic battle that lasted deep into the night. The opening set was filled with relentless pressure, long games, and momentum swings. One game alone lasted roughly 20 minutes and featured 13 deuces, with Eala repeatedly refusing to give Anisimova an opening. Eventually, the Filipina found the breakthrough and closed out the first set 6-4. The crowd exploded. Philippine flags filled the stands, chants echoed throughout the stadium, and for a moment it looked like another major upset might be coming. Eala had already proven she could defeat elite opponents, and her growing record against top 10 players gave her supporters every reason to believe. But Anisimova refused to disappear. The American responded in the second set, finding her range and applying increasing pressure from the baseline. Eala fought for every point, but Anisimova eventually secured the crucial break and leveled the match at 1 set apiece. Then came the deciding set. Eala started brilliantly. She held serve, broke Anisimova, and moved ahead 2-0. The stadium erupted again. The flags went up. The chants returned. Thousands of fans believed they were watching another unforgettable chapter in Eala's rapid rise. And then, suddenly, the momentum changed. Anisimova began winning the crucial points. Eala had chances to extend her advantage, but the American kept fighting back. The match turned from Eala's potential victory into a desperate battle for survival. The turning point arrived when Eala reached 40-15 in the 5th game of the deciding set. She was only 2 points away from strengthening her position and moving closer to a 3-2 lead. Instead, she lost 4 consecutive points. That single game changed everything. Anisimova seized control, and Eala could not regain the momentum. The Filipino crowd continued to support her until the final point, but eventually the comeback was complete. Eala's Cincinnati run was over. And then came the strangest part. As Eala walked away from the court, the noise disappeared with her. The same stadium that had been overflowing with Philippine flags and deafening chants only minutes earlier suddenly felt completely different. The defeat had ended more than a winning run. It had exposed just how much of Cincinnati's atmosphere had become connected to one player. For Eala, the loss was heartbreaking. For the tournament, it raised a much bigger question. Was the Cincinnati Open hosting a tournament, or had it accidentally created an event centered around Eala? 6 of the final 7 games went to Amanda Anisimova. She broke Eala's serve 3 times and closed the match with ruthless efficiency, completing a 6-4, 4-6, 6-2 comeback. And when Eala finally walked off the court, the stadium that had felt like her home all week suddenly went quiet. Philippine flags were lowered, fans slowly made their way toward the exits, and the deafening chants that had defined Cincinnati were replaced by an eerie silence. Then Anisimova stepped up to the microphone, and her words added another layer to the story. "I know Alex is such a great player and such a fighter. It was a really tough match," she said. But she didn't stop there. Anisimova openly acknowledged the support surrounding Eala, saying she appreciated the crowd because she understood just how loved Alex is, and for good reason. Then, with a smile, she joked that she needed the emotional boost because it was already past her bedtime. It was a light-hearted moment, but the message underneath was powerful. The world number 10 and eventual winner was openly recognizing that much of the atmosphere had been built around her opponent. Cincinnati had become Eala's stage, and even the player who ended her run could feel the impact. And that brings us to the bigger story. What happened to the tournament after Eala was eliminated? The Cincinnati Open still had some of the biggest names in women's tennis competing. Players like Aryna Sabalenka, Iga Swiatek, Coco Gauff, and Jessica Pegula remained in the draw. On paper, there was still plenty of star power. But the atmosphere had changed dramatically because the player who had generated such extraordinary fan attention was no longer there. The numbers surrounding Eala's run tell the story. Resale prices had reportedly surged for her matches. Ticket inquiries were heavily focused on her schedule, Filipino flags filled the stands, and the tournament even adapted parts of its food and merchandise offerings to accommodate the huge wave of Filipino supporters. That is more than ordinary player popularity. It is a commercial phenomenon. For a tournament director, however, that kind of dependence can also be uncomfortable. If one player can transform ticket demand, merchandise sales, social media engagement, and the atmosphere inside the stadium, what happens when that player loses? Cincinnati found out almost immediately, but the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story of Eala's tournament. She is only 21 years old, yet she has already established herself as a serious force against the world's best players. She won her first WTA singles title in Washington, defeated elite opponents along the way, reached the 4th round at Wimbledon, and pushed a top-level opponent through a dramatic 3-set battle in Cincinnati. Her latest loss hurts, but it doesn't erase everything she has accomplished. The US Open is now the next destination. Flushing Meadows will provide Eala with another opportunity to prove that her rise is not a temporary surge, but the beginning of something much bigger. She enters New York with more experience, more confidence, and an increasingly passionate fan base behind her. Great players aren't defined by never losing. They're defined by what they do after the loss. Cincinnati went silent when Eala walked away. But her story didn't end there. If anything, it may have just reached another chapter. And when Eala arrives in New York, don't expect the noise to disappear. Expect it to get even louder. If you're following Eala's journey all the way to the US Open, subscribe and join the conversation. How far do you think she can go at Flushing Meadows?